Thanks a lot, everybody, for joining. Our focus today is going to be on access certification. Sometimes it's called user attestation, sometimes it's called user access reviews, but they're all referring to the same topic. So we're going to follow the same format that we always do. We're going to just go over some background information, and then we'll look at how to basically configure access certifications within OpenIAM. And as always, if you have questions, just fire away, post them on chat, and I'll do my best to answer them. Okay. So let's start out with what access certification means and why we need it. So and maybe a little bit of background, right? So what we did so far is we've configured the solution, from a workforce identity perspective, where we're connected to a number of applications. We can define some roles and business rules, and we can automate the user lifecycle. We can provision and deprovision. We can also create workflows to request access. So those are things that we have done already. With user access, user access reviews or access certification, our goal is to be able to periodically review the access that people have. And the reason for that is that it's really twofold. One is people tend to accumulate access over time. So you tend to gain access and it doesn't go away. That's one. Second is, and when you do that, you're really creating a security risk within your organization, right? So we want to basically ensure that people do not have the access that they don't need. The other part is also at a lot of companies which are not implementing IAM, access doesn't get taken away. So it tends to linger after people leave. I'll give you an example. We're working with a customer right now where we did a POC for them with another partner. The partner is no longer involved, but the access that was created for them during the POC is still active. So perfect case for why we need to have controls over these things, to be able to detect access which is no longer needed and to be able to turn it off. Okay. The other part is that most mid to large enterprises now have to carry out some sort of SOC compliance activities, especially in the US and in Western Europe. I know that a lot of our customers have to go through this process, and it's a huge driver to why they're looking at IAM. So, and this also goes back to a point that we made early on in the beginning of these sessions, is a shift in what the drivers for IAM are. So 5-6 years ago, the drivers were largely about automation and saving time and cost. Now a big driver for IAM is simplifying the access review process, not failing the audits. So to support these activities, it's extremely important to have a process to perform these quarterly access reviews, right? And a side benefit of all this is that we have improved security when people don't have access they don't need. A byproduct of that is that overall security has been improved in that respect, right? So that's basically why we're doing these access reviews. So let's take another look at what our landscape looks like. And this is also part of the reason why doing access reviews today are becoming extremely complex. So we have applications today which are on-premise, right? These are your systems like Active Directory, your databases, your Linux boxes, and then they're also residing at your cloud providers like Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, Aldi Cloud. So the different cloud providers out there, which are, providing more of a infrastructure as a service for businesses to be able to use. So now we have identity in those services as well. We also have cloud providers with your ServiceNow, your Workdays, your Office 365s, and we need to manage identity in all of these. Now, to make the problem worse is that there's a lot of legacy applications out there. Those legacy applications are not so easy to integrate with. They don't have APIs, or they're not integrated with Active Directory. So they've got basically like a user interface where people have to go in and create accounts, delete accounts. So that becomes a little bit challenging, right? But this is the landscape that we're trying to control, and so we need to be able to control who's got access to what within this landscape. Okay, so let's take given this backdrop, let's take a look at what makes doing these access certifications hard. So first of all, before we can do an access review, we need to define the scope of the review. And what I mean by that is that all of your applications may not need to be in that review. It's fine if you want to include them, but it may not be needed. And the reason being is that all applications are not equally sensitive. So you may have some applications which are more sensitive than others. Some which need to be reviewed every quarter, some which can be reviewed maybe every 6 months, right? So we can define what the scope of the review is and the frequency of that review. For example, systems which have privileged accounts, those may need to be, or the privileged accounts themselves may need to be reviewed more frequently than, so less sensitive accounts. So once we define the scope, the next big challenge for a lot of companies is what they call collecting evidence or collecting the data from these applications. And simply what that evidence really is we need to be able to collect which people have access to an application and what their entitlements are within that application. And so considering the number of legacy applications out there which may not have a API or some kind of a way to interface with it, we need to be able to extract that information on a regular basis to be able to perform these audits. And so once we have this, then we can figure out how frequently we need to perform these campaigns, and then we can go ahead and do that. So as we've seen in multiple times that customers which don't have an IAM solution, they're spending literally 2 to 3 months in collecting the evidence that they need to be able to get ready for these audits. So what they'll do is they'll have a whole bunch of scheduled tasks like batch scripts that they run. They get Excel files, and somebody then manipulates those Excel files to create what looks like a review type of campaign. And then they send it out physically to the reviewers for each application. And then they go through this process where they have to, chase the people to make sure that it gets done. And the whole process takes about 2 to 3 months. We're seeing this consistently for mid to large enterprises. On the flip side, we've seen that people who do implement, say, OpenIAM, and I think this would be, true for really IAM solutions which kind of implement this capability, they're able to shrink that time frame down to a couple of weeks. And that couple of weeks is really in people doing the reviews because they need the time to do those reviews on top of what the normal day jobs are. Okay. So let's start focusing on the first part, which is let's go to our demo and let's look at what we mean by collecting the evidence, right? So in many ways, we've actually already been laying down the foundation for this in everything that we've been doing. So let's go into our application. So a couple of sessions ago, we set up connectors to be able to, or a connector with Active Directory. And one of the things that we did was we had some scripts that could import the group memberships or the groups that were in AD, followed by the user plus group memberships, right? And that was under our synchronization. And so these scripts would run, and they would bring in all the information into OpenIAM. Well, this is really exactly what we need to kind of do a user certification for for people who have access to Active Directory or they have group memberships within AD. So really this whole process that we went through about setting up connectors, the whole synchronization process, that is creating the backdrop for you to be able to perform these user access reviews. It's the first step it's that data collection or the evidence that you need. And while we focused on the Active Directory, this concept applies to everything that we have a connector for. So you'll see that we already have out of the box the same scripts for, say, AWS, for ADP, for Boomi and Box, so on and so forth. And anything that we create a new connector for, we can also write these scripts for it to be able to pull them. And what we recommend is that we should run these at least on a nightly basis, and not leave them right before when you have to run the review, because part of what we're trying to do is we're trying to also create a foundation so that you can have good control over the environment on an ongoing basis. So we should really look at the quarterly reviews as like the last resort to kind of catch problems. If we do these on a regular basis, we can be much more proactive in our approach. Okay? So then the question is, what do we do with those applications which don't have an API, don't have a way for us to create a connector? So in those cases, what we find is pretty consistently that is people can have some kind of a mechanism to export out a CSV file which has that information. So we can get a CSV file of all the roles, the groups that the system has, and followed by a second file which has the user and the entitlement memberships. Okay? And so this way we can create a picture of what a person has, both for automated applications as well as manual applications. Okay? So that's the first step. We do that, we have our evidence part taken care of, it's under control at this point. The other part by the benefit of doing it nightly is that we have some control where we can say, we can precisely say what day did somebody lose their access, like when did they get this access and when did they go away. So even if access wasn't granted through OpenIAM, if a entitlement shows up, say like there's a new group membership or a role membership, and it shows up on a certain date, we can detect that as saying that, okay, we see it coming in on this date, and we see the access being ended on a certain date, right? So creating even that basic information from an audit perspective, puts us into a much better position in terms of going to auditors and saying that we have control over the environment. So now that we have the evidence in place, it's pretty simple now. We just need to configure a campaign. And so to create a campaign, we go to access control. This, again, I'm in the web console, and I go to access certification. And let's go ahead and create a new campaign. So let's call this, AD and AWS user access review. Okay, so you'll see from the type of certification here that there really are two types of certifications that we can do. One is what we call a user-based certification, and the other one is an application-based certification. The user-based certification means that we're going to review all the access that a person has. So we're not going to limit the applications which are going to be in that review process. An application or an entitlement-based review is focusing on a very select, specific set of entitlements which are important for us, and to be able to review them. So this kind of goes back to kind of shaping what that review is going to look like, the scope of the review. What we find is for most of our customers, we prefer that they do a quarterly review of the sensitive entitlements, which must be reviewed for your SOC compliance. And then, twice a year, they should do a full user access review, which means that you can review all the access that people have. So this way, we're not really, letting the less important access still kind of, linger if there is a problem there. So for our demo, we're just going to pick the application-based review, and then we're going to define an interval of when we want to do this. So let's say we're going to do this quarterly. We can pick a reference date, and we can pick an email template that we want to use for this. And then we're going to have a UAR manager. So in this case, the UAR manager, you can think of this person as, this is not a manager as in like a supervisor. This is a manager in the from the sense that it's a person overseeing that the campaign is done in a timely manner. And this is often the person who will be interfacing with the auditors to make sure that they get the evidence and the details that they need to be able to perform their audits. So next thing is we want to define the applications that are going to be part of this. So let's pick AWS. And then we can also do our PowerShell connector. At this point, I can also do a preview if I want to. It will give me some users who are in both of these systems, right? And we can get an idea of the user population that we're working with. You're not limited to just the 2 applications. You can, as you can see, you can pick as many as you want. And the next part is to define the entitlements. So here I can say, well, use all the entitlements for all, for both of these applications. But in this case, I'm really after a specific set of entitlements. And I've done some configuration ahead of time. And you can see that I have domain admins in the contractors group that I'm going to pick. And you'll see that there's also a owner that's been defined here. And if you remember, when we were configuring our managed systems, there was a place where we can define a owner and an admin. So this is where this information is being picked up from, which we're going to use in our workflows. And then from here, on the AWS side, I'm going to do the same thing. And I'm going to pick a couple of entitlements. Again, this list could be much more exhaustive. You'll notice that I have 2 different types of entitlement owners in each one. And so given this, now the next thing I want to do is define my approval flow. And these steps here, you can add as many as you want as well. So let's say that I want to have the supervisor do, for each user, review their access first, because maybe they're the first, the first people, the people closest to their own team in terms of the access that they need. Right, so I'm going to say that they need to complete this in 3 days. I'm going to send them a reminder. Well, actually, I'm going to send them a reminder after 3 days. I'm going to do it once. And that means they need to complete this step in 6 days. Right? And then the next one is going to be the entitlement owner. And I'm going to give them the same amount of time. So at this point, my review process is defined. If I want to, I can also have an escalation. I can say, who is it going to escalate to? Let's say it's going to be to their supervisor, which means that if after sending out the reminders, they don't do what they're supposed to do, we can send out a message to their boss to say that so-and-so is not doing their part, give them a little bit of a nudge, right? So, and invariably, like almost most of our customers, people complain who are doing these, that it's really painful chasing up after everybody, right? So this gives us that that tool to be able to hound them. Also, we've added the ability to hound them in different interfaces, so we can send them an email. We can also send out messages on Teams and Slack. So we can be pretty intrusive in how we can remind people about doing this. Okay. So once the review flow is done, we go to the next step, which is now to actually execute this campaign. Okay. And if we had to set up on an auto schedule, that would have done it on its own. Since we're doing this on our own right now, let's go ahead and just hit execute now. And this will go. Okay, and if we go to the dashboard, we'll see that there's a review that's been started. There's 4 people who are involved, and it has who the first reviewer is in each one of these. Okay, so we have multiple people who are going to be reviewing this. So and the next thing is I'm going to log in as Jack, who's the approver for one of these, but he's also the UAR manager. So let's get out of this. Let's go to the self-service portal. And in the background, they would have gotten an email notification that says, there's a review waiting for you. So So if we go to user access reviews over here, the first thing is you'll see there's a dashboard which is telling you all of your campaigns which you have, which are active right now, and where they are in the flow. So you'll see that this one, which you just created, it's a two-step review. It's got user supervisor as the first step. The entitlement owner is at the second step. So besides being able to track progress, one of the things that we've seen at one of our customers that they wanted was to be able to plan time. They wanted to be able to know what's coming their way, how many reviews are going to be coming to them, and where does the person who's ahead of them in the review process, where are they, right? So this kind of allows them to kind of have some idea what their workload is going to be looking like, in the coming days. Okay. So if we open this up, and so at this point, I can see that, as Jack, as a reviewer, these are the reviews that I have on my plate. Now, there are a couple of different ways that I can do this. I can do this one by one if I want to. So that let's just say I can take Brendan's access, and I can see that he's got an AWS entitlement, and he's got a couple of AD entitlements. And so we see that there's actually 3 different layers. Now, this isn't entirely correct, because after the first step, or the way to read this really is that it's going to get split. The AWS approvals are going to go to the AWS admin, and the AD, the entitlements are going to go to the security manager. Right. So here I can go ahead and I can say, complete the review, which means I'm done. If I don't want to approve something, I can just revoke that. If I want to compare it with another person, I can go to the compare with screen, and it can open up a view. I can also add comments. I can send evidence. At some of our customers, they need to add attachments like screenshots that people have looked at something in the system. This allows us to go, put those kind of details together in one place. If we have 3 or 4 people to review, like we do in this demo, this is easy. We can look at it one by one. Reality is you may have a lot of people to review, and there may be a lot of applications to review. And this kind of our approach is kind of slow. So for that, we added a pivot view. The pivot view allows us to see all of the access that people have in a matrix. So we can see all the people, all the applications, and the entitlements within each one. And we can, so here I can say, well, this one's fine, this one is not okay, and this one is okay. I can do, I can move through it much faster. I can also be comparing similar people together at the same time. The other thing is that sometimes people may not know what these things mean, like they may not know what an API, right? So the entitlements detail allows us to open up, and we may have additional details that we can share with them here. Now, this view is really based on how much we load into the system, right? So how much data do we have to kind of help the reviewer understand what is it that they're looking at. Okay. So the entitlement details will give us a little bit of detail about the entitlement. And if we look at the user themselves, we can see some details about who this person is, what department they work in, how to contact them, right? And those, because it's unlikely that in a large corporation that the reviewers may know everybody just by looking at their name, right? Especially if 2 people have the same name. Okay. So let's say in this case, I am done, and I'm going to process this page. And it's going to now move on to the next person on the review list. Okay. So at this point, as the UIR admin, I can also have oversight of what's going on. So here on the administration screen, I can see a little bit of a dashboard. I can see where each reviewer is. So we had 4 people in the review. One is waiting with the security manager. These 2 have already been done. It says that Jack's already finished his review, right? So we can do that. Now, as the UAR admin, I also have a couple other capabilities. I can take these and I can delegate them if I want to. So imagine that the AWS admin is out for the week. we can't delay our review, so we can delegate them to someone else and have that person do the review if you want. If you want, we can cancel them for some reason. Maybe the review is no longer needed. And also, we can also send them a note. We can say, please get this done by, right, and some date. So we can do all of our communication and interactions from here. We don't have to reach out to these people on email and do it in a separate channel. So it can all be kind of centralized in one place. And that's really all that there is to it. So now the next thing is also the reports. So there's basically 3 variations of the same report. The scope report is what the review, the review looks like before anybody does a review. So it's the access that people have at the moment in time when the review was kicked off. So I can download that. And so, and auditors do ask for this so that they can see, what started. And then the current state allows us to see where we are right now, who's completed their reviews, who's processed it, so on and so forth. And the result is it gets generated automatically at the end when everybody's completed their review. Okay. And if we, open this up, we'll see, the people's names. We'll see the access that they have, the access type, the reviewer is assigned to where they are, right? And some details about them, any notes which have been added, so everything will appear here. Okay. So next part is, let's go in as the next reviewer. Okay, so here we see that the supervisor has completed their part. The entitlement owner is, the review is still pending. And you see that since that the AWS admin is not the UAR admin, their options here are a little bit limited. They don't have the dashboard, they don't have the report capability, but they do have the pivot. So here, when I look at this, I can see what the reviewer did before me. So I can see that this has been revoked. And I just have to complete my part. So I said, yep, I agree with that, and I agree with that. I can hit process the page, and then I'm done. And the last part is I can log in as a security manager, and they can complete their part of this. And you'll see that they have limited view as well, because they are so you'll notice that this person's dashboard is actually smaller, and that's because they're not involved in any of the other campaigns. So they're only seeing what they're seeing, and they see the status of the overall campaign that they're involved with. And this person only has 2 reviews, right? So we can look at them, and we can again go individually, or we can go as a pivot view, right? And we see where things stand. So at this point, I can just say, yep, everything is fine, and I'm done. And that's really all that there is to it in terms of being able to configure the user access reviews and to be able to perform these campaigns. If there's questions, I'm happy to answer them. If not, we can close the session. I think, for many of you, tomorrow is Good Friday. It's a holiday, so enjoy a long weekend.